and welcome to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast with Renae Hanvin, which is all about inspiring you to start thinking and doing disasters a little bit differently too. In this episode, I'm talking with Bruce Billson, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, and we're talking about it's time to focus on small businesses. So a little bit about Bruce. He commenced his role as the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, or ASBFEO, in March 2021. He brings experience and knowledge to the role of Ombudsman and an understanding of the issues facing small businesses, having started his own advisory business in 2016. Bruce's political career spans 30 years, including his role as Cabinet Minister for Small Business from 2013 to 2015. He's shown his dedication to small business through being a founding director of Judo Bank and various board appointments, including the Franchise Council of Australia, Deakin University Business School, and the Australian Property Institute. So I like to start with where we met. As many of you know, I have the former Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, Kate Carnell, as a volunteer advisor of Renae Hanvin, who's really provided me fantastic support over the past 5 or so years. I didn't know if there was anyone who'd be able to match the passion for small businesses as Kate, and then I met Bruce Billson. When Bruce became the Ombudsman in 2021, I was really quickly excited by his clear passion for everything small business. He is just so approachable, helpful, and he really is interested in what can help Australian small businesses to thrive. Over the past 3 years, we've had many catch-ups, and he's always been really keen to know what we're leading at Renae Hanvin, while suggesting who I should connect with and how our missions align. It's so great to have someone in a key small business government role give you the time of day to meet, to chat and learn about how we at Renae Hanvin can also drive positive change. Bruce, thanks so much for joining me today.
Renae, sad to be with you and your audience, ma'am.
Now, please explain to me and my listeners, what is the Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman? Why do you exist?
Well, we're the best ally a small and family business can have, particularly when things aren't going so well. We offer an assistance service which helps to resolve disputes without a small and family business hopefully needing to go to court, or it might be us steering those businesses to where the best place is for them to get help. We also publish a lot of data and insights around what's happening in the small and family business economy, where so many people, I use the phrase, rely on anecdata, recurring anecdotes to guide their thinking. We try and really look under the hood and provide a very clear evidence-based picture of what's going on. And the third thing we do is we champion the cause of small and family businesses by being advocates and engaging in the process of laws being formulated, programs being developed, policies being worked up. We make sure that small and family business voice is right on the radar screen and front of mind for decision makers. Well, we try to as best we can. So they're the 3 legs to our stool.
And it's so important to have someone who's so passionate and dedicated to small businesses in this role leading the space, because it is quite a different, lens between in government and small businesses. So we need someone to really be able to translate the best interests for small businesses in the, environment of the government. So I mentioned in the intro that you have, a background in small business. So where does your passion come from? Why are you so keen to spend every day working out ways, a bit like me, to help small businesses stay in business?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm extremely passionate about enterprising men and women. I've grown up in communities where small and family businesses are the economy. So I've seen firsthand just how vital that contribution they make and the courage that's exercised every day in taking risks, in, turning an idea into an investment and creating so many livelihoods that are so important. The hard stats are pretty compelling. 1/3 of all our GDP is made possible by small and family businesses. That's an enormous contribution. And 2 in 5 private sector jobs are made possible by those small and family enterprises. So that's the scope of why it's important and the connection it has with me in terms of my personal story. But where my mind is at is I see through government and the actions of regulators that well-intended people trying to do the right thing, trying to do their best. They're often very removed from the day-to-day life and experiences of small and family businesses that are impacted by their actions, by their decisions, and by the authority they exercise. And we try and bring that very vivid, real life. It's often the ACCC refer to me as the dirty boots regulator. I'm not actually a regulator, but we are in the field feeling the bumps and, the headwinds and the challenges, and we can feed that real-time insight into hopefully better performance of government, regulators and agencies, better decision-making, and a more supportive ecosystem for enterprising men and women. So that's what sort of drives me. And, having owned a few small businesses, some successful, some not so successful, I know what's involved, and, it's part of why I feel very purposeful and very motivated in the work that I do.
And as I said, we are so lucky because, as a small business person, I just want to do what I do. I'm not even necessarily that great in business, although probably pretty good. But I think it's a real skill and it's a real need on behalf of all of, small businesses like me to have someone who can really be our voice and advocate and then explain it to us as well. So important. So what do you think, what are the biggest challenges for small businesses across Australia today?
Well, right now it's really tough staying profitable. In the last full financial year where tax information is available, 46% of small businesses weren't profitable. For the 1.5 million Australians that are self-employed, that, create their own livelihoods, their own economic opportunities, 3/4, Renae, are taking home less than average total weekly earnings. Yet, given that modest income, there's no rivers of gold there. The regulatory burden just keeps growing and growing. And I'm concerned that risk-reward balance is out of whack at the moment. And there's far too many headwinds for small and family business people, not enough reward and an awful lot of risk, where if they operate in an increasingly complex regulatory environment, getting something wrong is a big concern. But the consequences of getting something wrong, you see penalties and the impacts of an error increasing as well. And, we're seeing, a shift in the demography. The average business owner is now 50. It's really quite staggering. And the number of business owners that are under 30 is about 8%, about half where it was in the 70s. So I'm even worrying about, what younger people or young at heart people must be thinking about the headwinds, the challenges, the big responsibility of owning and leading and running a business, and just what the rewards might be, and weighing that up against other lifestyle options, other livelihoods that might be a little less challenging. I'd argue far less rewarding. But, they might go, hey, if I'm just trying to bring cash in, I might choose to work for the man or the woman, not work for myself, and let someone else worry about whether the business is viable or not, the compliance and regulatory obligations, being up at 10 o'clock at night, filling out whatever the latest regulator wants from you. I can see why some people aren't jazzed by that. And we're trying to make sure that ecosystem is more supportive, but also tell the story about the joy that can be derived from leading and owning your own business. There's flexibility for some, not less work, but maybe more work, but you can structure and shape that in a way that works for you. It might be a passion, like you've done that, Renae. You've got a passion that you've turned into an enterprise, and that's a great way of pursuing a purpose with a profitability lens around it as well. And for even people, they might have some really strongly held beliefs, or, their jam might be something that has the bones of a business opportunity that, with the right support, the right encouragement, the right mentorship, and a supportive ecosystem, may well create livelihoods for themselves and others. And I want that to be more within reach than it feels like it is right now.
I mean, clearly hit the nail on the head because you are the expert in the whole sort of space, but you're so right. I mean, I love owning a small business, but it comes with so many challenges
Yeah.
and the red tape, for someone like me. I mean, I'm not, yes, I've got MBAs and all that sort of stuff, but I'm not a governance expert. And it does sometimes keep me up at night. Like, is that box ticked right? But that's where having the right support people around
Mm,
me who are experts, like lawyers and accountants who can work with me to make sure that's all set up properly, is absolutely essential. Because at the end of the day, I'm a person and yes, there's many hours that I spend that my others who are employed by other people, don't
mm.
have to because they've clocked off and left.
Yep.
But I have that flexibility. I can drive my own change, but I am a person who's trying to make a livelihood and employ other people and pay for their livelihoods as well. So I think that's the
Yeah,
forgotten
look,
bit, but
you're
we'll,
spot on, Renae. And the thing that I keep reminding lawmakers, government ministers, regulators, a small business is not a shrink wrapped version of a big corporate. You don't have those 20 people in a compliance department, an HR team of people, specialists, your own in-house lawyers. You don't have all of those folks at
no.
your beck and call. It's not like you've got a percentage of those because you're a percentage of a big business. You're the person, you're everything. And we see, increasingly the emotional burden that can carry, that arises, that, there's a sense of being overwhelmed. There's the complexity in the economy. I mean, we're always asking lawmakers to make more laws so bad stuff doesn't happen. And if it does, we want to blame somebody. It's a very interesting European culture we have for a nation that aspires to be, more expeditionary, more wind in their hair. That's not really who we are when people are asking lawmakers to make more laws. But then, to get that wrong, we've got some of the smartest. In fact, the department that creates the laws for workplace relations has been stung for not paying the right amount to their staff. Now, if those that conceive of the
Oh,
system are struggling with it, some of our largest employers in our universities with mountains of smart people in them are getting this stuff wrong. You can
mm.
imagine why a small business thinks, I want to do the right thing. I'm not quite sure what it is. And now with the changes coming in, a misstep on a pay rate could be wage theft. It gets really heavy very quickly. And for a person thinking about, hey, I went into the business because my jam was to do something around disaster preparedness. The business of running the business is not really what gets me out of bed every day. But man, that is a bigger and heavier burden. And I'm concerned about it. And my mind and my bandwidth are focused on that, not on the wealth creation, the value, the joy. That becomes a real concern. And I was struck by an observation by, in fact, the chair of the Small Business Subcommittee of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She walked up to me and said, Bruce, I love what you're doing. You're so on the money. And the way you describe these, the headwinds rather than wind in the sails, she goes, I'm just not having any fun anymore. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because, that fun factor, that sense of
Yeah.
joy out of doing what you're doing, people are
Mm.
describing that as something that they feel like slipping away from them. And, I often call work something you do when you'd rather be doing something else. For my small business journey and business journey, it's often not felt like work.
No.
But I'm hearing business owners saying this does feel like work. And, it's sort of really weighing heavily on me and displacing the passion and the joy that was such an important part of my business journey.
You're so right. Again, I mean, you've just totally explained to me. Like, I've changed my business model because of laws coming in and
Mm,
potential risks. And, financially, I can't, I won't be viable if I sort of, go down certain roads as to what I used to do. And you're so right. I mean, I love being in business. I love what I can change. I love being a role model to other people, and actually, having a commercial example as a social enterprise of being able to, drive really positive change. But it is hard at the moment. And I'll be honest, at the start of 2024, I gave myself a month and I said, if this hasn't happened, then I'm probably I'm gonna finish, because I just don't know if I want to do this anymore. Not that I can't do it, but I don't know if I want to do it, because there's been so many challenges. And alas, I'm
Renae,
still here.
You're spot on. I mean, even I mentioned that ACI small business subcommittee chair. It was a conversation that was born out of some survey work that her organisation had done. And it was almost half of small business owners said they'd contemplated just wrapping it up, just shutting the doors. It's just not worth the grief. And you sit and you think about, well, what's the consequences of that? I spoke about the GDP share. I spoke about the 2 in 5 private sector jobs. But think about where you are on Melbourne's Riviera there. You take small and family businesses out of your community. You're either faced with a commute to go to the CBD or something like that, or you might be, a rural or regional community that's not blessed with a mine or, a big milk processor or one single major employer. Small and family businesses are their economy. And if you start making that so hard and so challenging that it's unattractive and frankly quite rational for people to say, hey, I'm better off just getting paid a wage and salary and someone else can worry about all the grief. If we get to that point, we're going to lose so much vitality in our communities and viability in those communities as well, because where's the economic activity? Where are those livelihoods going to come from? Where's the appeal of a community centre without the local small and family businesses? I was just doing an interview earlier. I mean, one of the businesses, the bodacious Mrs. Billson and I used to own, was a gallery and fine Australian craft business down in Mornington, or the Mornington Peninsula. Right now, we would be working as hard as we ever worked, because if we can't make the festive season work, what does that mean for the business for the rest of the year? It can be really a go or no-go experience, because that's just the challenges that we face. And, the business owner's the last to be paid. Everyone else is first. And when there's more work to be done, and not the resources, not the buoyancy in the business to pay people to do it, you're just doing more time yourself, and the owners that do the extra hours. So I was just doing a bit of a shout out to those people at this time of year, where it can be really significant how things go for them in this window in terms of what the implications are for the viability going forward.
You're so true. And just to share, we won't be, this won't be out until next year, but we are recording this just before the holiday season. So for any holiday season for so many businesses, and, I'm not in a business necessarily that's reliant on, summer seasons or, tourism seasons, etc. But I certainly have certain times of the year that are really critical for me when, my customers need me to be delivering it and whatnot. And if you're a business that's set up for, I don't know, 60, 70% of your annual income comes from holiday sales, and, we don't have the money to spend and you're not getting the tourists and that, then that's massive impacts. And I hear so many times, Bruce, and I used to be the same, that I would pay everyone else before myself. And then I'd literally be sitting up at night going, oh my gosh, this month I need to dip into the savings because that client hasn't paid me. Well, so I'm waiting on the money to come in, but I'm making sure that I'm paying everyone else. So it is a real challenge, but I think, again, the benefits for me outweigh it. And again, I'm still here. Now, outside of all the red tape, which obviously you've mentioned that you really focus on, which is great, because that's the stuff, quite frankly, that bores me, but I need people like you to make it better. I'm obviously interested in the sort of different side and the disastery sort of space of really this new era of compounding disasters and disruptions. So we've got the natural hazards like the bushfires, floods, and then other impacts like cyber attacks, staff shortages, supply chain issues. I mean, I know we've sort of alluded to it, but it's clearly getting harder to be, well, in business in general, but to be in small business, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think your key point that you made in that introduction was, it's not like it's a single event and then there's a neat little window where you can recover. It's rolling. It's like, we've just got through and just getting the show back together after a disaster, and then something else hits. And this is something that, came up when we were doing our small business disaster preparedness and resilience inquiry. People were talking about this lack of recovery opportunity. and that was draining their reserves of cash and emotional resilience, frankly, and that was an enormous challenge, that they'd just get through that event, and it'd be devastating, and it would be, really challenging them at so many levels, because our work also revealed that so often small and family business owners are community leaders in another sense, and they're very, they're very active and involved in supporting their community. Sometimes they're not as focused on their own circumstances, and yet they are the ones leading the SCS work. They're very involved in the Chamber of Commerce. They are very generous, giving people, and they see their business as part of themselves, and part of themselves as part of a community, and there's that connectedness that sees them so generously give of time, effort, and insight. That can often mean they're being drained from a number of perspectives, not only dealing with their own immediate circumstances, but realizing it's not just their livelihood, it's their team's livelihoods as well. There's other people counting on them. Not only are their own families being challenged, but those people that are dear to them. Small business tend to have a very, very involved engagement with their team, because everyone's very personal and they all know each other. And then they're looking around and seeing that their community's been impacted in a devastating way, and there's this propensity to act, to want to help. So we see that as a real issue, and that at some point small business owners, they'll encourage their own staff to be involved in fire and rescue and Country Fire Authority and SCS, and they're so giving, saying, well, what's the plan to give back a bit and help replenish and renew, and when is that generous contribution maybe being extended to a point where it puts the business in a very difficult space? So we think there's a lot in that. We're also a little concerned that, for a lot of business owners who are, the greatest renewable resource in our country is small business owner optimism. I mean, even when things are, at any demonstrable level really challenging, they're still optimistic that the next season's going to be better, or it's going to improve. But part of that plays out in that only 1 in 4 small businesses actually have a business continuity plan. This is where people have sat down and thought about what could knock me off course. It might be a natural disaster, but many don't think about another kind of disaster. What if something happens to them? A health event, a caring duty obligation, their parents might be losing their marbles, and they're called upon to do what as a leader in a community and business sense, often in family sense as well. What happens then? Well, how are they going to get through that? What's the plan? What steps will they take? Where's the vital information that will keep the show going? That's another dimension we think is under-discussed, but really important.
Bruce, that is absolutely fundamental. And as you know, at Resilient Ready, I mean, we're all about helping to build knowledge and, to think different and do different. So getting people in small business and nonprofits to really be learning and embedding how they can be resilient and ready to all types of disruptions in their everyday business practices, because a business continuity plan is absolutely a critical asset. But so many people I speak to, they kind of started one and it's sitting getting digital dust, and they don't really update it. They don't really know what it means. It's all a bit complex. It's too hard. So what we're trying to do with our micro learning approach is getting people to think in really 5-minute intervals about what they can do to embed it. So you mentioned before, so many small business people don't think about themselves. So we have a mini module called linchpin. So it's like, who's the linchpin in your business? And I used to be the linchpin because I was the one that knew everything. And then I reset up my business so that actually anyone can come in and do things, because I've got all these video explainers or really simple ways that you can explain. Other people can pick up and do things. But again, lots of farmers that we present that to go, I'm like, get your phone out, record yourself starting the generator or the tractor, save it, email it to 5 people, and then you're not a linchpin when that task needs to happen anymore. So lots of really simple things.
They're great insights. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you and I have discussed this before, but the appetite and interest in business continuity planning is incredibly impressive immediately after a disaster or an event. But man, it falls away quickly. And it's sort of like, okay, no, I've really got to do one of those. Things are tough. I know someone I know has been through a big experience. I've been through a big experience. I've now got to think about that. And then there's, oh, what's that? I've got to get a BAS statement in.
Yeah.
And sort of just dragged
Correct.
off on the day to day. And we often
Yeah.
use the phrase, working on the business is different from working in the business, and that there's a need for that. The other thing too that we've observed is that those that are better prepared invariably bounce back better,
Yeah,
because they've
100%.
thought about a range of scenarios. They've got themselves match ready to
Yeah.
be able to contend with those. They know what steps to take. So even that sense of overwhelming challenge, or you're quite distressed, high degree of distress at that time, they've got a plan that says, well, you've done the thinking in a less challenged environment. You know what those action steps are. And, some of the work that I used to do as part of AusAid after natural disasters in the region, being able to do something constructively that's positive and it's action orientated after a big event is incredibly therapeutic, but it's also really helpful to get you back on track. So, there's a range of things like that. I'm glad to hear you've got those micro sessions. Really important.
So important. And again, we're all busy running businesses, but if you can take 5 minutes a day or a week just to think and do something a little bit different. And I think the World Bank data, Bruce, says that $1 invested before can save up to $15 in recovery. So it doesn't have to be money, like that you put in time as well. So just putting in time. I mean, those numbers are pretty big. So getting yourself ready for what's going to come, because there is going to be more ahead. Now, as you know, I've been advocating for small business community resilience for many years now, and we're slowly making some really positive change and getting it on the agenda. Now, in the disaster resilience sector, though, there is a massive gap in that small businesses are in so many ways the forgotten or ignored or totally misunderstood stakeholder group. And we mentioned before the notion of livelihoods, and we say this in the sector, we save lives and livelihoods as key priorities for disaster resilience, but we really don't as a sector activate that livelihoods part, especially not in the small business sense. Now, I've been saying for so many years that getting small businesses resilient and ready for the future falls through the gap. It's not us, it's not us is kind of a phrase that I've heard so many times. I actually thought of writing a book about it. Who's responsible for small business resilience? It's not us. But as a small business owner, I really appreciate, and I know the key responsibility for getting my business resilient and ready for disaster impacts, it sits with me. Like, it's my responsibility alongside every other small business owner. But with a bigger whole of government lens that you can bring, can you please share with me who should be responsible for helping Australian small businesses to get resilient and ready for the future challenges? Because we need help. Is it an emergency services, emergency management, disaster resilience issue? Is it a small business minister issue? Is it both? Please share with me who the golden child is I need to be following.
Well, we actually think it's all of those things, which is probably not very helpful. But what we've argued and keep advocating is that a small business front of mind posture is what's needed at so many levels. We do think in terms of emergency management, there's a vital role there. And even if it's not fully appreciated how economically vital the small and family business community is, in terms of the capacity of a community to respond, it's the same people, and there's such a crucial element. Those small and family business owners and leaders are so central to a community's capacity to respond. Having said that, we have urged that government think about how do you activate the capability and land the resources and insights that will help bring about the actions that you're hoping for. So we said, look, Emergency Management Australia, this needs to be part of your stuff. You would have seen in our report that 98 cents on the dollar after the event. We're urging a greater focus on preparatory sort of investment. We actually thought through local government, there was a real opportunity. Most of my state colleagues, the small business commissioners, oversee something called a small business friendly council program. We were arguing that, there's space for the feds to send some money through those programs to make sure at a local government level, there's a real connectedness and engagement and genuine conversation with small family and farming businesses at a local government level. We think that's important for three things. One, often the disaster planning at a local level is very much centrally driven out of a council area until it scales to a certain level. Where is the small and family business focus? A decision to shut a street prematurely can have a devastating impact. We saw in one of the Lismore floods, no discourtesy intended, but an out-of-towner event controller called, made the emergency call too early. So all the local businesses that actually had plans to move stock and assets all of a sudden couldn't do that because if their staff were hurt or injured because that emergency call had been made, that declaration had been made, workers' compensation wouldn't work. So there's an example where local knowledge was central to a timely and optimized approach. So we think through that channel, you get the local disaster planning would see, involve, and recognize the important dimension that small and family businesses should play, and then the role they can also play in recovery. It's also at a spatial level where you can bring talent and resources together. They might showcase under their economic development agenda, and most councils have them. They might see this as a real economic development opportunity and bring people like yourself and others into that community to share the knowledge and the resources and the tools. It'll see local people on the ground that are going to be part of any response actually know who they are. That if there's government support available, they'll stand up a hub where all that help will come together, and they'll probably activate all that help, which is often so generous, it falls over itself, and you end up having affected people having to tell their story over and over again rather than it being triaged and landed because, who knows you and I've had this discussion before, Renae. It's an extremely complicated and confusing ecosystem about who's involved and who makes what call. Well, can't we make that a little bit more straightforward? And then when it gets to the response, you understand that shipping in truckloads of stuff makes it impossible for the local business that sells that stuff to actually survive. It also is about saying it's not just those directly impacted, the local, and not my words because it can be a little bit grating, but the fireys call it the fire scar. Now, if you and I were running a crop dusting business in Western New South Wales and all of our clients were wiped out by a fire or a flood event or something, our planes might be fine. We've just got no customers. And to understand that connectedness within the economy, that's something that needs to be part of it. And then the help that's available, I keep urging people, households are very important, citizens are very important, but part of their life is their business. Where's the business support? Immediate help, but then a longer term plan to recover and implement, that continuity strategy, recognizing if you're a seasonal operator or a primary producer, the impact might be for multiple seasons, that you're not just going to get back on your feet just when the immediate disaster passes. So we've had a lot to say around that, and we keep advocating that point, but we do think a more joined up approach with a spatial lens brought to life through local government and timely support, including, through potentially that small business friendly council program, will bring capability, resources. It'll establish the networks that you want to know who's doing what, and it'll actually have people informed about what happens next with a lens on what the small and family business community can contend with, the role they can play, and the best path out for recovery.
Bruce, so what I'm hearing, and again, it's aligned to what we've been having conversations with for many years. I think small business needs to be and have a seat at the table. We're not invited to be at the table. And from every lens, from the responding to emergency services to the planning, strategies, etc., it's so important. I love, and I'm actually going to contact you in the new year about the friendly councils, because I think we are doing a lot with individual councils, and I think there could be some really big opportunities to do with statewide or national councils. And I think
an example, Renae, the Small Business Friendly Council program tends to be, give local contractors a chance, pay your bills on time, look like you care. And if you're doing infrastructure works, try not to cruel a business in doing so. They're the basic building blocks of it. Just add another one. Add a disaster preparedness lens and say, well, this is what we expect of you as well. And you want to do economic development stuff. This is pretty key to that. But it's also a model that can be rolled out elsewhere. I mean, people will go, oh, there's government grants around. Like what are they? Well, you build those relationships in advance. The council would be obliged to understand how the local small business community is organised itself. Who are the groups? Who are the movers and shakers? It might not be the chambers. It might be a craft group. Could be the Vignerons Association or whatever. But, that literally it builds those sinews, those connections that is so important to getting this right. And we think that's a good channel to tap to achieve that.
Oh, it's fundamental. And I know you've been alluding to the economic side of it in this conversation, but as you know, we've just won a lot of funding to deliver a social capital and social infrastructure project from 2025 with Professor Daniel Aldrich, which is going to bring a measurement to the value of social infrastructure, including social businesses. So the cafes, the pubs, I mean, every regional community we talk to, they talk about how vital the pub is. Yet anyone from emergency services doesn't go anywhere near the pub. It's like, but hang on, that's where the community is. But we might need another podcast for that. Just to let you know, we are delivering a project with a council in New South Wales in 2025 that's actually going to create them a disaster response plan for the community with a lens on what small businesses do and don't need. So exactly those notions of, to keep our small businesses and farmers in business, this is what we do and don't want to come, into the community to help us. So hopefully that will be a bit of a groundbreaking lens, because I know so many businesses in Gippsland in Victoria and whatnot, and they own the local store. They went out, their fire captain, they went out to fight the fires. Their business basically went under because they had no revenue coming in and they couldn't sell anything because of all the free stuff coming in. So it's an ecosystem of problems, but we'll save that from another day. Now, to finish, I always ask the same two questions. What would be the two things you'd like to be done differently in the disaster space?
Two things. One would be roll out a place-based, local, small business-focused agenda through the Small Business Friendly Council program at local government. That would put small and family businesses front and centre in the planning for, the understanding of impacts, the operationalising of a disaster response, and would be a great way of bringing together in one plaza the help and resources that are available with a local implementation lens to them. That would be number one. Number two, I would probably talk about joining up some of the mitigation work with financial rewards. I am a little critical of the insurance sector for constantly saying risk mitigation, risk mitigation, risk mitigation. But we all know insurance operates on a pooled or collective risk model. So if you and I were two of 2,000 that had done everything imaginable in a mitigation sense, we will get absolutely zero benefit in terms of the affordability and accessibility of our policies. Insurance is such an important part to it. And I think for people, we need to show that there is reward and better access and better affordability if people do take the steps that are within their gift to take. And I really think a recalibration around that to incentivize preparedness, to incentivize risk assessment and mitigation, to have people thinking in that line, realizing that their risk mechanisms, whether it's self-insured or whatever the case may be, require them to stay vigilant and engaged. But there needs to be some incentive and benefit and reward for those doing all they can. And I think that's a big part of the piece that needs to be improved, in my view.
So true. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. And obviously, when we met in person recently, I shared with you our Doing Insurance Differently white paper and focus. And we are in really active conversations with industry groups and governments and also corporates actually at the moment. And I'm having some amazing conversations with certain small business commissioners in some states at the moment to be putting in to seek some funding to really drive change across that whole space.
It's needed. I mean, to give you from coast to coast, a visitor destination on the south coast of New South Wales virtually has accommodation buried, all infrastructure protected. Incredible efforts to guard against fire. No, you're in the wrong region. We're not going to insure you. Same thing's happening in Margaret River right now. Incredible amount of work that's being put in, and it's just no reward for people that are doing the right thing. This pool, this postcode, this collective evaluation, I think, is actually crueling the very sincere and genuine efforts of people who are doing all they possibly can. I think they need to see an upside from that. And I'm urging the insurance sector, who knows more about this than anybody, to not just keep explaining why things are tough and why it's so expensive or not available. Map the path to fix it.
Correct.
Use all that data and insights to map a path forward. That's what I've been urging, and we'll stay on that case.
Yeah, I love it. Well, definitely we'll be talking a lot more of that in the future because we're on that path too. So a massive thank you to the Bruce Billson, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, for talking to me about it's time to focus on small businesses. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Great to be with you. Take care.
I hope today's episode of Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, has inspired you to think a little bit differently about the role you can play before, during, and after disasters. Given the new era of more frequent and compounding disasters that we are now in, let's work together to build an all-hazards disaster resilient future for all. Find out more about the work I'm leading as a social enterprise building disaster resilience at resilientready.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, through your preferred platform. And we'll see you next time when we discover new ways of doing disasters differently together.